This is Lake Geneva, the largest lake in Central Europe. First the Pile dwellers settled here, then the Celts and the Romans, later the Burgundians and the French. In the 16th century, the Swiss conquered the upper part of the lake and have not given this area back to this day. In the 1950s, the British arrived, attracted by the low taxes, but also by the beauty, quality of life and political stability of the country. One of the first was Charlie Chaplin, who was fed up with the political climate in the United States. In the spring of 1953, he moved into the new home the Sublime Manor House de Ban in Corsier-sur-Vevey with his fourth wife Una O'Neill and their children. And, of course, he showed the children his films. His films Modern Times and The Great Dictator are unforgettable. The view over Lake Geneva must have been breathtaking, but over the 70 years the trees around the lower end of the property have grown tall. Charlie's favorite corner where he thought about new movies. At the entrance to the Ban is a life-size statue of Chaplin with a photo of Una. He was 54 when they married in 1943, she was 18. The marriage lasted until his death. His last film was A Countess from Hong Kong, which he made with Marlon Brando, Sophia Loren and Tippi Hedren as well as 3 of his children. In October 1977, his health deteriorated and he needed professional care. And while the Ban was shrouded in snow, Sir Charles Chaplin passed away. It was December 25. On March 1, 1978, his coffin was dug up at the cemetery and stolen by 2 shady foreigners to extort money from Una Chaplin. In a large-scale police operation, the 2 were caught and the coffin was buried in a concrete-reinforced grave in the cemetery of Corsier-sur-Vevey. Before we get to James Mason and Richard Burton, a brief detour into world literature. Vladimir Nabokov was born in the Tsarist Empire. In 1917, his family fled from the Bolsheviks to Berlin. After the Nazis came to power, he and his wife emigrated to the USA. There earned his living by teaching at various universities. He also worked as a butterfly researcher and discovered 20 new species. And he studied complex chess compositions. But his driving force was writing. His breakthrough came with his 12th novel Lolita in 1955, which immediately caused a scandal. The subject, an older man with a very young teenage girl. Nevertheless, the book became a bestseller. Because readers were now also buying the earlier novels, the royalties were flowing in. Nabokov was able to resign from his position at Cornell University and return to Europe with his family. Fascinated by the incredible view over Lake Geneva, the family decided to look for accommodation in Montreux. In 1961, he and his family moved into the luxury Montreux Palace Hotel and remained 16 years there until his death in 1977. He was buried in the Clarens Cemetery above Montreux. While searching for his grave I find this one. It is Charlie's older half-brother Sidney and his wife. Sidney died in Nice, France, in 1965. But why does he lie here and not next door in the Corsier-sur-Vevey cemetery, where Charlie was later buried? I have no idea. James Mason moved to Switzerland in 1963, specifically to Corsier-sur-Vevey, the neighboring town of Montreux. There, Vladimir Nabokov had sold the film rights to Lolita to Stanley Kubrick and James Harris. The movie was released in 1962. It starred James Mason and Sue Lyon. He acted in Hitchcock's film North by Northwest with Cary Grant. And in the Nazi thriller The Boys from Brazil with Gregory Peck and Laurence Olivier. James Mason was a great cat lover. He wrote a book with his first wife and made the drawings for the book. Although I speak French, I couldn't find Mason's house. It was probably demolished and a new building was erected on the same site. In any case, he lived in Corsier-sur-Vevey with his second wife, the Australian actress Clarissa Kay, and flew around the world to accept further role offers. He died of a heart attack in a clinic in Lausanne on July 27, 1984 and was cremated. James Mason left his entire estate to his second wife Clarissa Kay, but his will was contested by his children Portland and Morgan. The dispute was still unresolved when Clarissa Kay died in Sydney on July 21, 1994. She left her estate and Mason's ashes to the Guru Satya Sai Baba. The children sued the Guru, who gave them Mason's ashes. According to another source, Portland and Morgan found the urn containing their father's ashes in a safe deposit box at a bank in Geneva. However, they had the urn buried in the cemetery of Corsier-sur-Vevey in a grave just 7 steps away from the grave of his friend Charlie Chaplin. The British author Graham Greene, who died in 1991, also lies in the same cemetery. How Richard Jenkins became Richard Burton. Richard was an extremely talented pupil with a good singing voice. In March 1937, he took an examination for admission to Port Talbot Secondary School, and passed. There he met his teacher Philip Burton, who recognized his pupil's theatrical talent and became his mentor. In 1943, Philip Burton wanted to adopt Richard, but was too young to do so. As a result, Richard became his ward and changed his name to Richard Burton. Richard accepted the RAF's offer for qualified cadets to study on a 6-month scholarship before active service. He went to Exeter College, in Oxford. He then spent 3 years in the Royal Air Force. He made a name for himself as a talented actor on stage and in 3 English films, which brought him straight to America. He came to Hollywood in 1953. His first appearance was in the war film The Desert Rats, with James Mason. The Burton and Mason couple became friends. He had his first leading role in the first CinemaScope movie The Robe, where he played the Tribune Marcellus Gaullio. From then on, his career continued unstoppably. Finally, in 1962, he took on the role of Mark Antony in Cleopatra alongside Elizabeth Taylor, the woman he married twice. Together they earned tens of millions and lived accordingly. Elizabeth Taylor had a chalet in the sophisticated resort of Gstaad in Switzerland. Switzerland was not unfamiliar territory for Burton. He had already moved his residence to Seligny near Geneva in 1957 to save tax money. The spacious house, of which unfortunately we can only see the back, was his home for 27 years. On the right-hand gatepost it says Land of the Welsh in French. He could reach his favorite restaurant, the buffet at the railway station, in 15 minutes on foot. It is still a very good restaurant today. He probably went with his children to the harbor of Seligny where they watched the big ships and where he also had a boat. He acted with Clint Eastwood in the World War II spy thriller, Where Eagles Dare. He acted in the movie 1984 with John Hurt. It was his last movie. On August 5, 1984, Richard Burton died of a brain hemorrhage in a clinic in Geneva. He was buried in Seligny, not in the regular cemetery but a little further away in the wooded old cemetery. I wouldn't be surprised if he chose this spot himself. Because of the high humidity, the gravestone looked after years very unsightly. The newspaper La Côte reported on it. Apparently Burton's daughter Kate heard about it. She contacted Philip Jennings, a Welshman who lived in the area and, together with his wife, spruced up the grave. Not far from Richard Burton rests the Scottish novelist Alastair MacLean, who also lived in Seligny and must have drunk some bottles with Richard Burton. Audrey Hepburn, née Rustin, changed her name after her father discovered the name Hepburn on older documents of his British ancestors. In 1953, she met the French fashion designer Hubert de Givenchy. This developed into a close collaboration. He created the costumes for almost all of her film roles. She acted in 1956 in the monumental film War and Peace with her first husband Mel Ferrer, to whom she was married from 1954 to 1968. She moved 1960 for a few months to Hollywood, to act in the 1961 unforgettable film Breakfast at Tiffany's, with George Peppard. Hepburn was the big star in the late 50s and was one of the leading actresses in Hollywood until the end of the 60s. Her style was copied by young women all over the world. She came to Delachna, not far from Lausanne, in 1963, where she bought a manor house with a large garden. And she acted 1966 in How to Steal a Million with Peter O'Toole. She took active interest in public life and visited the market in nearby Morges every week, which is of course different today than it was 60 years ago. In 1969, Audrey Hepburn married her second husband, the Italian psychiatrist Andrea Dedi, in the time-honored town hall of Morges, to whom she was married until 1982. She traveled with her husbands and sons on historic paddle steamers on Lake Geneva to Geneva, Montreux, or even Evian. In later years, she worked as a special ambassador for UNICEF. When she returned from a trip to Africa, she did not feel well. She thought she had contracted a virus. However, the doctors who examined her discovered that she was suffering from appendix cancer. She preferred to stay at home with her family and died a few weeks later on January 20, 1993. Her funeral was attended by her first and second husband Mel Ferrer and Andrea Doty, her companion of recent years, Robert Wilders, her sons, Sean Hepburn Ferrer and Luca Doty. But also Hubert de Givenchy, Alain Delon, Roger Moore and members of UNICEF. Peter Ustinov was a jack of all trades and I would have loved to have met him in person. I lived in his area in 2003 and could have visited him. But it's doubtful whether he would have let me in, as I was neither well-known nor prominent. He moved to Switzerland in 1971, to Bersens in the canton of Vaud. He probably had his house rebuilt. It stands in the middle of the vineyard. The driveway to the house is guarded by two lions, which probably originate from Peter Ustinov. During the Second World War, Ustinov served as a private in the British Army, as an officer's boy for David Niven, who was a lieutenant colonel. Ustinov was a British actor who appeared in over 70 films, dubbing himself in German and French in English-language films. On June 23, 1965, he met Una and Charles Chaplin at the Dutch airport Schiphol. The reason is not known to me, but the Chaplins do not seem to be particularly pleased. He was an excellent networker. His word carried weight in the casting of films. In 1972, he made the film Hammersmith Is Out with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. James Mason was also booked for the movie Evil Under the Sun. He was a film producer, a talented writer and musician, humorist and humanist. In addition to English, he spoke fluent French, German, Italian, Spanish and Russian. And he was an excellent diplomat, giving lectures at universities and working with Heart and Soul for UNICEF. Sir Peter Ustinov suffered from diabetes and heart failure and died on March 28, 2004, not far from his home, in a private clinic in Grenouillère. The tomb befitting his extraordinary personality is located in the Berson Cemetery. David Niven did not live on Lake Geneva, but only a good hour's drive away, in Chateau d'Ar. He moved to Switzerland in 1960. He graduated from the Royal Sandhurst Military Academy but soon became interested in acting. He got a small role in the British film There Goes the Bride in 1932. In 1933 he left the service and moved to New York and then to Hollywood. There he got some smaller roles in 1935. At the outbreak of the Second World War, he returned to Britain and rejoined the army. After the war he retired as a lieutenant colonel. He then soon appeared in many films. He is best remembered for the film The Guns of Navarone, with Gregory Peck and Anthony Quinn. And, of course, The Pink Panther, with Claudia Cardinale and Peter Sellers. He acted in the movie Death on the Nile, with Peter Ustinov, his friend since war days. He had a leading role in the movie The Sea Wolves, with Roger Moore and Gregory Peck. During the second half of 1982, he fell ill, with the muscle disease ALS, and died on July 29, 1983. His funeral was attended by his family and people from Chateau d'Ar as well as Audrey Hepburn and Roger Moore. Roger Moore didn't live on Lake Geneva either, but in Gstaad since 1977 and was therefore a neighbor of David Niven, who lived just a quarter of an hour from Gstaad. Moore appeared on television at a young age in Ivanhoe. Soon after, he starred with Tony Curtis in the TV series The Persuaders. He became known to a wider audience as the Saint. He appeared in the film The Wild Geese, alongside Hardy Kruger, Richard Harris and Geneva seaside resident Richard Burton. And he was James Bond in 7 James Bond films. He later moved to Crans, Montana, a 2-hour drive from Lake Geneva. Sir Roger Moore died of cancer on May 23, 2017, surrounded by his family, in Crans, Montana. He was buried in the cemetery in Monaco at his own request. His funeral was also attended by all the James Bond actors. Sean Connery, George Lazenby, Timothy Dalton, Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig.